Ethan stepped off the transport ship, his boots pressing against the smooth, dark surface of the alien landing platform. The air was thick but breathable, carrying a faint metallic scent. Around him, towering figures moved with disciplined grace. The Velzeri, an advanced warrior species known for their height, strength, and intimidating presence. He felt like a child among giants. The average Velzeri stood at least 8 feet tall, their bodies lean but powerful. Their skin came in shades of silver and bronze, and their glowing golden eyes watched him with quiet curiosity. Despite the overwhelming presence of these towering beings, Ethan forced himself to remain calm. He was here as a diplomat, after all. His job was to represent humanity, not to let fear take over. A figure stepped forward. Commander Sci-Fi. Ethan recognized her from the mission files. She was one of the highest-ranking officers in the Velzeri Defense Fleet, known for her unmatched combat skills and sharp strategic mind. Her long, dark silver hair was braided tightly, and her form-fitting armor shimmered under the alien sun. She crossed her arms and studied Ethan, her golden eyes filled with amusement. Then, with a smirk, she said, "You're smaller than I expected." A few Velzeri warriors behind her chuckled, their deep voices echoing in the open space. Ethan exhaled slowly. He had expected something like this. The Velzeri admired strength above all else, and to them, size was a symbol of power. At 5'10", Ethan wasn't short by human standards, but standing before these giants, he might as well have been a child. Still, he wasn't going to let them get the better of him. He smiled and replied, "And you're taller than I expected. Good thing I didn't bring a ladder." There was a brief pause. Then, to his surprise, Sci-Fi let out a chuckle, a short, amused sound. The warriors behind her exchanged glances, slightly impressed that this human wasn't completely intimidated. "Clever," Sci-Fi admitted, tilting her head. "But size isn't just about height, human. It's about strength, endurance, and other things." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Other things? You'll have to be more specific, Commander." Sci-Fi smirked. "You wouldn't understand." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe. But I do understand this. I'm here for diplomatic relations, not to compare sizes." That earned another chuckle from the warriors, though Sci-Fi simply narrowed her eyes at him. There was something calculating in her gaze, like she was testing him in some way. "We'll see if you're worth our time, human." She turned and gestured for him to follow. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward, ignoring the heavy stares from the surrounding Velzeri. They walked through the grand halls of the Velzeri capital, the walls lined with intricate patterns carved into obsidian-like stone. The architecture was both elegant and imposing, much like the people who built it. As they entered a large chamber, Ethan noticed a massive training ground where Velzeri warriors sparred. Some wielded long energy staffs, others fought barehanded, their movements precise and deadly. The ground trembled slightly from the sheer force of their strikes. Sci-Fi stopped and turned to him. "Tell me, human, how do your people measure strength?" Ethan crossed his arms. "That depends. Physically, we train. Mentally, we learn. Emotionally, we endure." Sci-Fi raised an eyebrow. "Endurance. That's a soft way to define strength." Ethan smiled. "Not really. Strength isn't just about fighting, Commander. It's about knowing when to stand your ground and when to adapt. That's how humanity survived." For a moment, Sci-Fi just stared at him. Then, with an almost playful look, she leaned closer. "Then prove it." Ethan blinked. "Prove what?" She grinned, showing the sharp edges of her canines. "Prove that your small body holds a strong spirit." The Velzeri warriors behind her grinned as well, clearly entertained. Ethan sighed. He had a feeling this wouldn't be a simple diplomatic mission. And how exactly am I supposed to prove that? Sci-Fi stepped back and crossed her arms. "Simple. You will take part in our warrior trials. We have 3 tests, each designed to push your body, mind, and spirit. If you fail, we will know that humans are not worth our time. Ethan glanced at the sparring warriors, then back at Savannah. He wasn't a soldier. He had no illusions about defeating a Velzeri in a physical fight. But he wasn't going to back down either. He straightened his posture and met her gaze. Fine. I accept. A slow smirk spread across Savannah's face. Good. Try not to break too easily, little human. The warriors chuckled, and Ethan exhaled. This was going to be a long mission. But if the Velzeri thought size was all that mattered, then Ethan was about to show them exactly what humanity was capable of. Ethan stood in the middle of the massive training ground, surrounded by towering Velzeri warriors. Their glowing golden eyes watched him with amusement, some whispering among themselves, clearly doubting the small human's chances of success. Commander Savannah stood before him, her arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. You agreed to the warrior trials, human, she said. Now let's see if you have the strength to back up your words. Ethan exhaled slowly. He wasn't a soldier. He had no illusions about overpowering these giants in a physical fight. But he wasn't about to back down. Let's get this over with, he said, keeping his voice steady. Savannah chuckled. Confident. I like that. But confidence won't save you. She turned and gestured toward a large, muscular Velzeri warrior standing nearby. This is Dravok. He will explain your first trial. Dravok stepped forward, towering over Ethan. His deep voice rumbled like thunder. Your first trial is the test of endurance, he said. You must hold your ground while facing the force of a Velzeri warrior. We will push you back. If you fall, you fail. Ethan frowned. So, I just have to stand my ground. Dravok smirked. If you think it's that simple, you will learn quickly, human. Two warriors brought out a large circular platform, placing it in the center of the training ground. The edges of the platform glowed blue, marking the boundary Ethan had to stay within. Dravok stepped onto the platform. I will go easy on you, human. Ethan sighed. He doubted that. He stepped onto the platform, adjusting his stance. Dravok planted his feet firmly and raised one hand. Then, without warning, he pushed forward. A sudden force slammed into Ethan's chest. It wasn't just physical strength. It felt like being hit by a speeding car. His boots skidded against the platform as he struggled to keep his balance. The Velzeri warriors laughed, clearly expecting him to fall instantly. But Ethan gritted his teeth and dug his heels in. He wasn't stronger than Dravok. He couldn't overpower him. But he could outthink him. Instead of resisting the force head-on, Ethan shifted his weight, using his smaller size to stay balanced. When Dravok pushed harder, Ethan twisted slightly, absorbing the force without letting it throw him off completely. The laughter died down. Some of the warriors murmured in surprise. Dravok narrowed his eyes. Clever. Then he pushed harder. Ethan's muscles burned as he fought to stay upright. His body trembled under the force, sweat forming on his brow. His legs screamed in protest, but he clenched his jaw and refused to fall. Come on, human, Dravok taunted. Show us your strength. Ethan didn't reply. He just focused. Every time Dravok changed his attack, Ethan adjusted his stance, using the momentum against him. Seconds stretched into minutes. The pressure was unbearable, but Ethan refused to break. Finally, Dravok stepped back. He crossed his arms and nodded. You pass. A few warriors clapped in respect. Savannah tilted her head, watching Ethan with interest. Not bad, human, she admitted. You lasted longer than I expected. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. You'll find that humans are full of surprises. Savannah smirked. We'll see. She turned to another warrior. Prepare the second trial. Ethan sighed. That was only the first test. Trial 2. The test of wits. A large stone table was brought forward, its surface marked with intricate patterns and symbols. At its center was a three-dimensional puzzle, made of interlocking metallic pieces. Savannah stepped forward. The second trial is a test of wits. The Velzeri do not only value strength, we value intelligence. You must solve this puzzle in under 5 minutes. Ethan frowned. What happens if I don't? Sylvanas' smirk widened. Then we assume humans lack the intelligence to stand alongside us. Ethan took a seat at the table. The puzzle looked like a complex sphere, its pieces shifting the moment he touched them. The Velzeri warriors watched closely. Think, Ethan. He studied the puzzle. It was built with a rotating core, each outer layer connected through moving joints. If he forced it, he'd break it. It wasn't about strength. It was about precision. Ethan took a deep breath and started moving the pieces, feeling the resistance and adjusting accordingly. He wasn't the strongest, but he was quick. Time ticked away. The Velzeri whispered, some smirking, expecting failure. Then, with a final twist, the pieces clicked into place. The puzzle glowed softly, signaling completion. The chamber fell silent. Sylvana blinked. Already. Ethan leaned back, wiping his hands. You said 5 minutes. I did it in 4. A murmur spread through the warriors. Some looked impressed. Even Dravok gave a slow nod. Sylvana studied Ethan, then let out a short laugh. You're an interesting one, human. Ethan smirked. That means I pass, right? She nodded. Yes, but don't celebrate yet. She stepped closer, golden eyes gleaming. The last trial is the hardest. Ethan sighed. Of course it is. Sylvana grinned. Rest while you can, human. Tomorrow, we test your spirit. Ethan exhaled. 2 trials down. 1 to go. And he had a feeling the last one would be the toughest yet. Ethan woke up feeling sore. His legs ached from the test of endurance, and his hands were still stiff from the test of wits. But he had no time to rest. Today was the final challenge, the test of spirit. He sat up from the small cot in his assigned quarters and stretched, wincing slightly. All right, Ethan, 1 more to go, he muttered to himself. A loud knock echoed against the metal door. He already knew who it was. When the door slid open, Commander Savannah stood there, arms crossed, golden eyes watching him with amusement. You look tired, human. Did the first 2 trials break you? Ethan smirked. Not yet, but let's see if this next one does. She chuckled. Brave words. Follow me. A trial like no other. Ethan walked beside Sylvana through the grand halls of the Velzeri stronghold. The walls were carved with ancient battle records, stories of great warriors who had proven their strength. The deeper they went, the colder it became. After several minutes, they reached a massive underground chamber. The walls glowed faintly with blue crystals, casting a dim light over the area. At the center of the chamber was a deep pit, its bottom hidden in shadow. A bridge extended halfway over it, stopping suddenly. Ethan frowned. So, what's the challenge? Sylvana leaned against a nearby stone pillar, her smirk still present. The test of spirit is simple, human. You must jump into the pit and climb back out. Ethan blinked. That's it. One of the Velzeri warriors, Dravok, let out a low chuckle. The fall will not kill you. But the challenge is not the jump. It is what waits for you below. Ethan stepped closer to the edge and peered down. He couldn't see the bottom. A cold wind rose from below, making the hairs on his arms stand up. And what exactly is waiting for me? He asked. Sylvana's golden eyes gleamed. Fear. Ethan sighed. Of course, it couldn't be simple. The leap into darkness. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped onto the bridge. The warriors around him watched in silence. There was no laughter this time, no teasing remarks. This was different. He reached the end of the bridge and looked down. His heart pounded. His fingers curled into fists. The unknown was always the hardest thing to face. Then, without another thought, he jumped. The air rushed past him, cold and biting. The light above faded as the darkness swallowed him whole. Then, impact. Ethan hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the shock. Dust rose around him as he groaned, pushing himself up. He was in a vast underground cavern. Strange whispers echoed through the air, and a dim blue mist floated around him. The walls seemed to shift, as if they were alive. A shiver ran down his spine. Something was here. Then a voice, his own voice, spoke from the darkness. "Why are you even trying, Ethan?" Ethan froze. The voice came from behind him. Slowly, he turned. A shadowy figure stood there. It was his exact reflection. Same face, same uniform. But its eyes were hollow, filled with an eerie light. "You are weak," the shadow whispered. "You don't belong here. You are nothing compared to them." Ethan clenched his jaw. This was the test. The Velzeri valued strength, intelligence, and endurance. But this was about facing fear itself. It wasn't a battle of fists or wits. It was a battle of will. The shadow stepped closer. "You will fail. You are just a human. Small, fragile, breakable." Ethan's heart pounded. Every part of his mind screamed at him to run. But he stood his ground. He had been afraid before, of failure, of proving himself, of standing in a room full of towering warriors. But fear only had power if he let it. "Maybe I am small," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Maybe I am breakable. But that doesn't mean I'll stop." The shadow paused. "I am not strong because I don't feel fear," Ethan continued. "I am strong because I face it." A deep rumbling echoed through the cavern. The shadow twitched as cracks appeared across its form. The whispers grew louder. Then, silence. The shadow shattered. The cavern shook. The mist faded. And suddenly, light poured down from above. Ethan looked up. The exit was right there. A long climb ahead, but he wasn't afraid anymore. Victory and respect. The Velzeri warriors stood in silent anticipation, their eyes fixed on the pit. Many had seen warriors break in the test of spirit. Some never climbed back out. Then, movement. A hand appeared over the edge, then another. Ethan pulled himself up, his arms shaking but his expression firm. He stood, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat, but unbroken. The chamber was silent. Then, Dravok slammed his fist against his chest in a warrior's salute. One by one, the other Velzeri warriors did the same. A gesture of respect. Sivana stepped forward, her golden eyes unreadable. Then, for the first time, she bowed her head slightly. "You have passed, Ethan of Earth," she said. "You are stronger than you seem." Sivana chuckled. "Perhaps I underestimated you." She leaned in slightly, a teasing glint in her eyes. "But you're still small." Ethan laughed. "Yeah. And yet, here I am, standing with you." For the first time, Sivana had no comeback. The warriors around them cheered. Ethan had done it. He had proven himself. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The great hall of the Velzeri stronghold was alive with celebration. Warriors gathered around massive stone tables, their deep voices filling the air with laughter and conversation. The scent of roasted meat and exotic spices lingered as goblets clashed in toasts. Ethan sat among them, still feeling the ache in his muscles from the 3 trials. He had passed, and now he was being honored. It felt surreal. Across from him, Commander Savannah leaned back in her seat, golden eyes watching him with amusement. "You look tired, human. Did our trials break you?" Ethan smirked, taking a sip from his goblet. "Not yet, but you sure tried." The warriors around them laughed. Dravok, the towering warrior who had tested Ethan's endurance, clapped him on the back with enough force to make him nearly spill his drink. "You fought well, human," Dravok said. "I thought you would fall in the first trial, but you proved us wrong." Ethan grinned. "Glad to surprise you." Sivana tilted her head. "You are stronger than you seem. But the real question is, what now?" The hall grew a little quieter. Ethan hesitated. What now? He had passed the trials, But that didn't mean he had a place among the Velzeri. He wasn't one of them. Sci-Fi smirked, sensing his thoughts. Do you wish to leave, or do you wish to stay? Ethan exhaled. He had expected to be sent away after the trials. But now, part of him didn't want to leave. I don't know, he admitted. Dravok crossed his arms. You have earned our respect, human. But a warrior is not simply made through trials. A warrior must have a purpose. Ethan frowned. And what's my purpose here? Sci-Fi leaned forward, a glint of curiosity in her eyes. That is for you to decide. A warrior's choice. As the celebration continued, Ethan slipped away, stepping out into the cool night air. The sky above was filled with twin moons, casting a soft glow over the towering spires of the stronghold. His thoughts were restless. Why did he hesitate? He had come here by accident. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't born into the warrior life like the Velzeri. So why did part of him want to stay? Thinking too much, human. Ethan turned to see Sci-Fi standing behind him, arms crossed. Just trying to figure things out, he said. She stepped closer, her gaze sharp but not unkind. You have proven yourself, but proving oneself is only the beginning. Many warriors pass the trials. The real test is knowing what you fight for. Ethan sighed. And what do you fight for? Sci-Fi was silent for a moment, then said, For my people. For the honor of the Velzeri. For those who came before me. Ethan nodded. That made sense. But what about him? Sci-Fi studied him carefully. If you wish to leave, you may. No one will stop you. But if you choose to stay, then you must fight not just to prove yourself, but because you believe in something. Ethan met her gaze. And what if I don't know what I believe in yet? For the first time, Sci-Fi's smirk softened. Then perhaps it is time to find out. An unexpected threat. Before Ethan could respond, a sudden horn blast echoed across the stronghold. Sci-Fi's expression immediately hardened. An alarm. Ethan followed her as she moved quickly through the halls. Warriors rushed past them, grabbing weapons and armor. What's happening? He asked. Dravok met them at the entrance to the war chamber. His face was grim. Scouts report an unknown force approaching the southern perimeter. They are moving fast. Sci-Fi's eyes darkened. How many? Too many. Ethan felt a chill. The Velzeri were strong. If they were worried, then this was serious. Is it another alien race? Ethan asked. Sci-Fi shook her head. No, it is something worse. She turned to him. Stay inside, human. This is not your fight. Ethan frowned. You're kidding, right? I just went through all your trials, and now you're telling me to sit this out. Sci-Fi's golden eyes flashed. You do not know what we are about to face. Ethan squared his shoulders. Then tell me. Dravok sighed. The Shralke. We have fought them before. They are relentless, mindless, and they do not stop until everything before them is destroyed. Ethan's stomach tightened. And they're coming here. Sci-Fi nodded. Yes, and if they break through, there will be no stopping them. Ethan gritted his teeth. He may not have known his purpose yet, but one thing was clear. He wasn't about to stand by and watch. Then I'm fighting too, he said. Sci-Fi studied him for a long moment. Then, with a smirk, she handed him a small Velzeri combat blade. Then prove to me, human, that you are truly one of us. Ethan gripped the blade. His choice had been made. The battle was coming, and he was ready. The stronghold trembled with the sounds of preparation. Warriors strapped on armor, checked weapons, and took their positions along the outer walls. The air was tense, thick with the promise of battle. Ethan stood among them, gripping the Velzeri combat blade that Sci-Fi had handed him. It was smaller than the weapons the other warriors carried, but it felt solid in his hands. His heart pounded. Stay close to me, human, Sci-Fi said as she adjusted the plating on her armored forearm. This is not a trial. The enemy will not hold back. Ethan nodded. I figured as much. Dravok approached, his massive form casting a shadow over both of them. The scouts report that the Shralkai are nearly here. We have minutes, maybe less. Ethan glanced at the warriors around him. They were fierce, strong, battle-hardened. He was the only human here, the only one who had never fought in a real war. But he wouldn't run. He had made his choice. The Shralkai arrive. A deep roar echoed across the battlefield, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Then, from the shadows beyond the stronghold walls, they came. The Shralkai were unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Tall, insectoid creatures with hard black exoskeletons that gleamed under the twin moons. Their many eyes glowed with a sickly green hue, and their long, bladed limbs clicked as they moved. They did not march in formation. They swarmed. Ethan's breath caught. That's a lot of them. Sivana's expression was unreadable. They never come alone. A massive horn blasted through the air, the signal to attack. The Velzeri warriors let out a war cry and charged forward. Sivana drew her long, curved blade, moving with the deadly grace of a seasoned fighter. Dravok led a squad toward the eastern gate, roaring orders to his warriors. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon. This is it. No turning back. Fighting for survival. The first wave of Shralkai crashed into the Velzeri defenses. Blades clashed, energy weapons fired, and battle cries mixed with the shrieks of the alien creatures. Ethan barely had time to react before one of the insectoid warriors lunged at him. He dodged, barely avoiding the razor-sharp claws that slashed through the air where he had been standing. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he fought against them. Focus, Sivana shouted. Strike where they are weakest, the joints. Ethan took a deep breath and waited. The Shralkai screeched and attacked again, but this time, Ethan was ready. He ducked, rolling under its swinging arm, and slashed at its leg joint. The alien let out a piercing shriek as green fluid sprayed from the wound. It stumbled, and Ethan stabbed his blade into its exposed neck. The creature collapsed. Ethan stared at its unmoving form, his breath ragged. I did it, but there was no time to celebrate. More were coming. Holding the line. The battle raged on. Warriors fought in brutal hand-to-hand combat, while others fired energy blasts from the ramparts. The air smelled of burning metal and alien blood. Ethan fought with everything he had. He was smaller, weaker, and less experienced than the Velzeri, but he was fast. He dodged, rolled, struck at the weak points. For every Shralkai he helped take down, more took their place. There was no end to them. Ethan. Sivana's voice cut through the chaos. He turned just in time to see her engaged in a fierce battle with a larger Shralkai warrior, twice her size, covered in thick armor. She was fast, but the creature was relentless. It swung a massive bladed limb at her, forcing her to dodge backward. She struck at its chest, but her blade bounced off its hardened shell. Ethan didn't think. He rushed forward, grabbing a discarded spear from the ground. As the Shralkai raised its blade to strike Sivana, Ethan hurled the spear with all his strength. The weapon pierced the creature's exposed side. It let out a terrible screech, turning in confusion. Sivana took the opportunity. Her blade sliced cleanly through its throat. The creature collapsed, its green blood pooling around it. Sivana turned to Ethan, her golden eyes wide with surprise. You threw a spear at it. Ethan shrugged, breathing hard. Seemed like a good idea. She blinked, then let out a sharp, amused laugh. Not bad, human. But the battle wasn't over. A loud explosion rocked the ground. A section of the wall collapsed, and more Shralkai poured in through the breach. Dravok ran toward them, blood covering his armor. They are breaking through. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead. We need a plan. Fast. Sivana's expression hardened. We hold them off as long as we can. We cannot let them reach the heart of the stronghold. Ethan nodded. Then let's make sure they don't. They took their positions once more, The battle was far from over. But Ethan was no longer just an outsider. He was a warrior, and he would fight. The stronghold was in chaos. Smoke filled the air, and the sounds of clashing weapons, alien shrieks, and battle cries echoed through the stone walls. The Shrelkai had broken through the outer defenses, and now they were inside. Ethan stood beside Sivana and Dravok, his heart pounding. His arms ached from fighting, but he couldn't stop now. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the Velzeri, for survival. Dravok gritted his teeth, gripping his massive war axe. We cannot let them reach the command chamber. If they do, the stronghold will fall. Sivana wiped green alien blood from her blade, her golden eyes burning with determination. Then we make our stand here. No more retreating. Ethan tightened his grip on his combat blade. Let's do this. Holding the line. The next wave of Shrelkai charged forward. Their sharp claws clicked against the stone floor, and their glowing green eyes shone through the darkness. The Velzeri warriors formed a defensive line, shields raised, weapons ready. The moment the creatures reached them, the battle erupted again. Ethan dodged a deadly swipe from one of the creatures and plunged his blade into its side. Green blood sprayed as the creature let out a terrible screech and collapsed. But there was no time to rest. Another one was already coming. Beside him, Sivana moved like a storm, cutting down enemy after enemy with deadly precision. Dravok fought with raw strength, his massive axe splitting through the armored exoskeletons of the Shrelkai. Ethan wasn't as strong or as fast as them, but he was quick. He weaved between enemies, striking at weak points, avoiding direct attacks. For a moment, it seemed like they were holding the line. Then, a terrible roar shook the air. A new threat. Out of the darkness, a massive Shrelkai stepped forward. It was different from the others, larger, stronger, and covered in even thicker armor. The warriors around Ethan hesitated. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a Shrelkai warbringer, a leader of their forces. Its glowing green eyes locked onto Sivana. It hissed, stepping forward with slow, deliberate movements. Sivana raised her blade. You want to fight? Come and get it. The warbringer attacked. It moved fast, too fast. Sivana barely dodged its first strike. Its massive bladed limbs slammed into the stone floor, cracking it apart. She slashed at its arm, but her blade bounced off the armor. Ethan's heart pounded. This thing was stronger than anything they had fought before. Dravok charged at it with his axe. Die, beast. The warbringer swung its massive limb and sent Dravok flying into a wall. The impact was brutal. Dravok collapsed, unmoving. Ethan's stomach dropped. No. Sivana attacked again, moving with incredible speed. She aimed for its joints, but the warbringer was too fast, too strong. It struck her with its clawed hand, sending her crashing to the ground. Ethan's breath caught. Sivana didn't get up. Ethan's decision. Ethan gritted his teeth. His body screamed in exhaustion, but he forced himself forward. The warbringer turned toward him, its many eyes glowing. It let out a deep, clicking sound, almost like it was mocking him. You're too small to satisfy my feelings, Sivana had once teased. Now he had to prove her wrong. Ethan gripped his blade. He was not a Velzeri warrior. He didn't have their strength, their speed. But he had something else. His mind. He took a deep breath. If brute force wouldn't work, he needed to be smart. He looked at the battlefield, the fallen weapons, the broken walls, the loose stones. An idea formed, a human's way of fighting. The warbringer lunged at him. Ethan jumped to the side, barely avoiding its claws. He grabbed a broken spear from the ground and threw it, not at the creature, but at a pile of loose debris above it. The impact shook the structure, sending heavy stones crashing down on the warbringer. It roared in pain as the weight pinned its lower body, trapping it. Ethan didn't stop. He grabbed a fallen energy rifle, turned to Sivana, who was struggling to get up, and tossed it to her. She caught it, immediately understanding his plan. She aimed the rifle directly at the Warbringer's head. A single shot rang out. The creature's body collapsed. Silence filled the air. Ethan breathed heavily, staring at the fallen Warbringer. They had won. The aftermath. The remaining Shrulkai, seeing their leader defeated, retreated into the darkness. The battle was over. Velzeri warriors gathered around Ethan and Sivana. Many were injured, but they stood tall, victorious. Dravok groaned as he pulled himself up, shaking his head. Remind me never to charge one of those things again. Sivana stepped toward Ethan, wiping blood from her lip. That was reckless. Ethan shrugged, still catching his breath. Worked, didn't it? For a moment, Sivana was silent. Then, to his surprise, she grinned. You fight like no warrior I have ever known. Not with strength, but with something even more dangerous. Your mind. Dravok crossed his arms. Perhaps there is more to this human than we thought. The warriors nodded in agreement. Ethan looked at them, the people who had once doubted him. And now he was one of them. Sivana placed a hand on his shoulder. You have earned your place, Ethan. Welcome to the Velzeri. For the first time since he had arrived in this strange world. Ethan smiled. He had found his purpose. The battlefield was silent now. The Shrulkai had retreated, leaving behind their fallen. Smoke still drifted in the air, mixing with the scent of burning metal and alien blood. The Velzeri warriors, battered and wounded, stood victorious. Ethan looked around, taking it all in. Just hours ago, he had been an outsider, a weak human in a world of powerful warriors. But now, he was one of them. Sivana sheathed her blade and turned to him. It's over. You did well, human. Ethan smirked, wiping sweat from his forehead. I have a name, you know. Sivana chuckled, her golden eyes filled with something close to admiration. Yes, Ethan. You have earned more than just a name today. Dravok limped toward them, his massive form covered in bruises. Ha! I thought the little human would die in the first charge, but you proved me wrong. Ethan crossed his arms. You weren't exactly invincible either, Dravok. That Warbringer sent you flying. The large warrior grunted. A minor setback. The Velzeri around them laughed, the tension easing. They had lost many warriors, but they had won. And in the end, that's what mattered. Recognition. As the warriors gathered, the Velzeri High Commander arrived. She was an imposing figure, her armor shining under the twin moons. Her gaze swept over the survivors before settling on Ethan. Step forward, human. Ethan hesitated, then obeyed. The High Commander studied him for a long moment. Then, in a firm voice, she said, You have done what no outsider has ever done before. You have fought alongside us, bled alongside us, and most importantly, you have helped lead us to victory. Murmurs spread among the warriors. The High Commander continued, It is only right that we honor you as one of our own. She turned to Sivana. What say you, warrior? Does this human deserve a place among us? Sivana met Ethan's gaze. He fights with his heart. He is reckless, unpredictable, but he is brave. He has earned his place. Dravok nodded. Agreed. The High Commander raised a hand. Then it is decided. Ethan, you are now a warrior of the Velzeri. You will no longer be called an outsider. Ethan's breath caught. He had expected recognition, maybe respect. But this was something more. He wasn't just accepted. He was one of them. A choice to make. As the warriors began repairs on the stronghold, Ethan found himself standing near the edge of the battlements, staring at the alien landscape beyond. Sivana approached. You are quiet. Ethan exhaled. Just thinking. She tilted her head. About. He looked at her. My home. Earth. Sivana's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Do you wish to return? Ethan hesitated. He had thought about it, of course. Earth was his home. His people were there. But standing here, after everything that had happened, did he really want to leave? I don't know, he admitted. This place, it's different, but it feels like I belong here too. Sivana was silent for a moment. Then she said, "The choice is yours. You have earned the right to stay. But if you choose to leave, know this, you will always have a place among us." Ethan smiled. "That means a lot." She smirked. "Good. But if you do stay, I expect you to train harder. You are still too small to satisfy my expectations." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "I'll prove you wrong again." Sivana's eyes gleamed. "I look forward to it. A new beginning." That night, the Velzeri warriors celebrated. Fires burned bright, songs were sung, and warriors shared stories of the battle. Ethan sat among them, feeling something he hadn't in a long time, a sense of belonging. Dravak clapped him on the back. "Drink, human. A warrior must celebrate his victories." Ethan laughed, taking the offered cup. He wasn't sure what the drink was, but he took a sip anyway, and immediately coughed. "That's strong." The warriors laughed. "He may be a warrior, but he cannot handle Velzeri fire brew." Even Sivana chuckled. Ethan grinned, shaking his head. "I'll get used to it." For the first time, he realized this was his home now. Not Earth, not the world he had left behind. Here, among the Velzeri, he had found something greater than just survival. He had found a family, and he would fight for them, no matter what came next.